Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the Lunchtime Devo with Bo O today, where we're in 2 Samuel chapter 12. Going to go through that, going through the narrative of David. Very cool stuff, very interesting stuff to say the least, and a lot of conflict, right? Who would have thunk it? So many people, when they think of the Bible, they kind of think of these stained glass people, and I used to think that way all the time, by the way. Like when I thought of the, like, man, Bible church things, that kind of stuff, I always thought they were kind of the untouchables, like they were people that, again, you couldn't understand, you couldn't relate to. They kind of were riding high on this plane, unlike the rest of us, poor saps who just kind of meager, through meander through the world with struggles and difficulties, but as we see, just rolling through the Bible, man, it's filled with all kinds of us, right? It's filled with messy folk up and down. Very few biblical characters come across as being actually pretty right on. Very few. Most of them are pretty much like all of us. So we're in chapter 12, 2 Samuel, and we're just going to read it for the devotion and check it out. You can always look at the archives that I have on my own personal YouTube channel if you just want to go through the Bible with me in a real kind of quick devotional style. So it says here, so the Lord sent Nathan the prophet to tell David this story. Again, Nathan the prophet comes up, kind of a guy who, doesn't always get it right. We saw that one time he spoke, quote, like said, hey, this is kind of where the Lord's, what he's saying. And the Lord had to say to Nathan, nope. So it's not like this guy's got it all together either. He's not a perfect dude, but he is a guy who, is thinking about God, talking to God, getting messages from God, kind of God's will for the people. And I love it. He's not afraid to share this with David. And think about it. David's the king. You share your heart with the king. You share maybe something that he's doing wrong. You never know. Maybe something's going to happen to you, Nathan, right, for sharing this. But Nathan's, kind of confident. He obviously senses that this is something, his position, that he needs to share it. And, by golly, I hope that, we all can share what we need to share in the right moments, in the right contexts. So, I hope that can happen in our lives as well. And so, David here gets confronted by Nathan the prophet. There were two men in a certain town. One was rich and one was poor. The rich man owned a great many sheep and cattle. The poor man owned nothing but one little lamb he had bought. He raised that little lamb and grew it up with his children. It ate from the man's own plate and drank from his cup, and he cuddled it in his arms like a baby daughter. One day a guest arrived at the home of the rich man, but instead of killing an animal from his own flock or herd, he took the poor man's lamb and killed it and prepared it for his guests. David was furious, of course, after hearing about this. And as surely as the Lord lives, he vowed, any man who would do such a thing deserves to die. He must repay 4 lambs to the poor man for the one he stole and for having no pity. Then Nathan said to David, you are that man, the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king of Israel and saved you from the power of Saul. I gave you the master's house and his wives and the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. And if that had not been enough, I would have given you much, much more. Why then have you despised the word of the Lord and done this horrible deed? For you have murdered Uriah the Hittite with the sword of the Amorites and stolen his wife. From this time on, your family will live by the sword because you have despised me by taking Uriah's wife to be your own. This is what the Lord says, because of what you've done. I will cause your own household to rebel against you. I will give your wives to another man in front of your very eyes, and he will go to bed with them in public view. You did it secretly, but I will make this happen to you openly in the sight of all Israel. Ugh, rough. It's always a bummer, right? When kind of you got to reap what you sow in a lot of ways. You got to, you kind of, you dug a hole and now you got to live in it kind of thing. And David gets this story from Nathan, and David gets mad, when he hears this story, because he sees the injustice that was done in the little, story. But then Nathan says, "Hey, man, you're the guy. You're the guy who's done this injustice." And it's interesting, right? It says, God gave you all this stuff, and you already have all these things, but you wanted more, and you sought to murder people for it, to kill, and as a human being, I got to ask, who would I murder? What do I want, and would I murder for it? And a lot of us go, well, no, I would never do that. And I would just go, wow, well, you know what? I think it's in us to do such a task like this, such a hurtful thing. And, I imagine that, human history bears this out, that humans are good at harming other human beings. That's one thing that we do very well. And, we have a lot of things today that keep us occupied, so we don't have to think about maybe how what we're doing is damaging other people. And there's no doubt about us being filled with so much entertainment that we kind of lose sight of maybe what we do that hurts other folk. So we might hurt other people, and we might just not even spend the time thinking about how we've hurt them, or because we're so filled with other forms of entertainment that just, have latched a hold of us, and we just simply, watch or listen, or we're always busy, and we never really contemplate, man, have I done an injustice? Is there things that I do that are wrong? And, am I part of the same system that I criticize all the time? I criticize the systems, I criticize things like this and that, how it is, but yet I'm a part of it too. And here we see that David is going to reap what he sows, and we all in a sense will. There's no doubt. You can't get around this law that you reap what you sow, and we all do it. Whatever we're doing, it's having an effect. And, we reap what we sow, and what we eat, what we drink, everything. I mean, you think about it, everything. We're reaping what we sow, It's amazing. People talk a lot about like clean cars, and, you got the emissions issues and stuff like that. Well, yeah, you get rid of all the gas, and then you got batteries you got to deal with. Then you got the cobalt that you have to mine to make the big giant batteries. And you have all these other issues. Then you need to fuel the factories that are refining things to make batteries. It's like we just can't get around the idea that, man, we're just a wreck, and we will reap what we sow, no matter what. And that's not a doomsday kind of thing. It's not like, oh, Bo's, talking about doom. No, it's just the idea of that. You're going to reap what you sow, and that's true. You eat a big burrito, you're going to reap what you sow. You drink that drink, you're going to reap what you sow. We watch this all the time. We reap what we sow. It just goes on and on and on, right? And that's true, And David here is going to reap what he sows, man. This punishment is gonna kind of follow him. And it's something that is been kind of on the cusp, man. David's been a guy. He's been very reckless in his life, in many ways, man. His violence, his anger has just at times gone from 0 to 100, man. Just really radical. And here now he gets the word that, man, the sword's never going to leave your house. And that, you try to be secret with this. Well, now you're going to see someone come in and mess with your spouses, plural, by the way, and they're going to do it publicly. They're going to publicly try to shame you. Your political world is going to be topsy-turvy from here on. Crazy. And that's true. That's what's going to happen in David's life. And so Nathan gives this prophetic word from the Lord to David. And let's see what David says. So then David confessed to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. You might want to read some of the Psalms that are the confessional Psalms of David. Psalm 51, Psalm 32 might be a great place to start. And read kind of where David was at in his heart at this time. How much time elapsed between the sin of Bathsheba, the whole issue of him walking on the roof, to this time? How much time had elapsed? This was not something that just, happened overnight. This was way down the road here. And so, David confesses to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. The best thing to do is keep short accounts with God. I mean, that's my thought is, hey, am I keeping short accounts? Am I just talking to God every day about my sin, about my behavior, about my attitudes? Am I coming to the Lord? Hey, God, Father, you see my heart. You see the yuck in it. Help me through this. I need your Holy Spirit to clean up my mouth or clean up my mind. Just help my thinking at this time. So David now says, hey, I have sinned against the Lord. And that's the right thing to say, right? Hey, are you afraid to say that? Are you afraid to say, I have sinned against the Lord? And if so, why? Why are you afraid to say that? Nathan replied, yes, but the Lord has forgiven you, and you won't die for this sin. David deserved the death penalty, according to the Torah, according to the law. Man, you commit adultery, you die. That was it, man. That was it. You commit adultery, you're dead, according to Torah, according to the law of Israel. David was a king. He's not to multiply wives. He did it. He broke the law again. He's a violent man. Killed people and took their money for over a year. I mean, like whole clans. Really radical. Man, pretty intense. And so this guy really broke some laws, right? Nevertheless, because you have shown utter contempt for the Lord by doing this, your child will die. Do I show contempt for the Lord? Man, do I show just like, oh, well, God, it's not really that important to God? Man, that's a convicting thing, don't you think? Where, man, do I have that kind of contempt, where I just neglect, that kind of, let's look up the word contempt just to see if we can get some insight into that. Contempt, define. And I love doing this on the fly with you guys. It's a feeling or attitude of regarding someone or something as inferior, base, worthless, scorn. Whoa, right? It's a state when you show contempt, you're at a state of dishonoring someone, So it's basically saying you haven't really honored God at all, right? You have contempt for the Lord. Man, and that's something where I think we would have to answer, yes, we have. We've dishonored the Lord. We haven't shown respect. We've showed willful disobedience to God's law, contempt for it. The law says don't do this. David did it. And so, David was to uphold the Torah, the law of God, and he didn't. And so we see that after his child was going to die, this child that Bathsheba was carrying, and after Nathan returned to his home, the Lord sent a deadly illness to the child of David and Uriah's wife. He went without food and lay all night on the bare ground. The elders of his household pleaded with him to get up and eat with them, but he refused. Then on the seventh day, the child died. David's advisors were afraid to tell him. He wouldn't listen to reason while the child was ill, they said. What drastic thing will he do when we tell him that the child is dead? So David, when he was in mourning, when the child was, in a sense, in Bathsheba, alive, right? A living child, right? We get that from the scriptures here. The child is alive, right? In the womb. We get this idea that David was sad. He was sad to the point where he wasn't really easily approachable, and people were kind of walking on eggshells. And now the baby is born, and on the seventh day, the child dies. And the advisors say, hey, man, I don't know if we're going to go tell David because he's been so weirded out. If we tell him that his child died, maybe he's just going to go off. Let me ask you, are you the type of person where people don't know how to act before you because you're so volatile? You're so emotional that it's hard for people to be around you or talk to you because they don't know how you're going to go. You kind of have shown that you're a little all over the board. You kind of have big emotional swings. And so everybody's a little on edge around you. They don't know if you're going to get upset or get bent or you're going to lash out, or, they don't think you're going to be even keeled at all. You become unapproachable. Man, I don't want to be unapproachable. I want to try to be even keeled so I can be approachable, even in emotional times. And so when David saw them whispering, he realized what had happened. Is the child dead? He asked. And yes, they replied, he is dead. Then David got up from the ground, washed himself, put on lotions, and changed his clothes. He went to the tabernacle and worshipped the Lord. After that, he returned to the palace and was served food and ate. So David, what does he do? He gets up after the child dies, he washes, he goes and worships. What a cool thing. After someone dies, what should I do? Maybe I need to go worship, right? Maybe I need to get ready and go to the house of God. Go to that place, go to, that area where I can just seek the Lord. And I love that. You grieving, you go through a rough time, you lost a loved one. Man, what's the best remedy? Maybe it's just you to go and worship the Lord. Notice he doesn't get mad at God. He doesn't say, God, this is what you did. You brought this on. You're so bad. He doesn't go off like that. Some of us do as humans. We go, man, God and his, if God's so loving, why does he do this? We lash out. We continue to lash out. We continue to think that we are in the know constantly when we know we're not. Look at the world. I mean, it's scientific fact, man. You don't have to, you believe in science? Just take a peek, right? Look at the world. Use empirical evidence. Look out there. We ain't that good, man. We mess up everything we touch, right? But yet we somehow think that our brain can literally judge a creator, could judge the deity. Yeah, we do. We think we can. We think we got it. We think we know more. Unreal, right? But it just affirms our absolute baseness. That's what that kind of attitude does. It just affirms the reality that we are a mess, right? So when we're talking bad against God and criticizing God for God's judgments, if anything, it just proves the existence of God and our baseness, right? It just shows that we are a lost people, absolutely reckless. But David, what does he do? Man, he doesn't do that. He gets up and he goes, man, I'm going to go into I need to come to God on God's terms, right? I'm not going to just judge God. I'm not going to bag on God. And I've done my plenty of share of that. So I know what that's like, where you just start ripping into God, and, but he doesn't do it. So the advisors were amazed. We don't understand, they told him. While the child was still living, you wept and refused to eat. But now that the child is dead, you have stopped your mourning and are eating again. Interesting. Baby's alive, you mourn. Baby dies, you refresh yourself and go worship and eat. David replies, I fasted and wept while the child was alive, for I said, perhaps the Lord will be gracious to me and let the child live. Do you see David's heart? Perhaps God will be what? Gracious. Meaning what? Maybe we don't deserve, right, any kind of goodness, right? Maybe because we're not that good, right? Maybe we're not good at all. But David has a mindset of saying, hey, I know I'm a mess and I need grace from God. That I need, if God could, perhaps maybe God will be merciful. God doesn't need to be gracious. God, I'm not deserving of that, but perhaps God will shed that grace upon me. What a humbling attitude. Perhaps maybe it's not one of privilege. It's not one of entitlement, oh, I deserve this. Man, how does our culture talk? Absolutely entitled. Absolutely I deserve, right? Yeah, we don't understand this that well. Maybe it's grace. Maybe, I need to look to God and just understand that he is God and I am not. And if God wants to be gracious to me, perhaps he will. And that's awesome, but I certainly don't deserve it. And if God judges me, he judges me in righteousness. He judges me based on his righteousness, his rightness, according to his right law. And boy, I'm the failure of that. And so David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and slept with her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and David named him Solomon. So now, we see a year's passed already, just in that little verse, that little sentence. The Lord loved the child, sent word through Nathan the prophet that they should name him Jedediah, which means beloved of the Lord, as the Lord had commanded. Meanwhile, Joab was so amazing, right? All of a sudden, there's this gracious part, this blessing of a child, and this grace that's given to David and Bathsheba. And they know they don't deserve this, but it's given. There's a restoration that's taking place. You can't have restoration if you don't bail, if you don't have a fall, right? It's like we all want to be restored, but we don't want to admit that we're messed up. It makes no sense. In order to have any kind of restoration and reconciliation, you have to have a separation and you have to have the yuck, the admission of our failure, And so, unfortunately, a lot of people want to have all the restoration and the reconciliation, but they're not willing to say, hey, I'm wrong. I don't deserve reconciliation or restoration. I would love it, but that's a grace. That's a mercy. I certainly don't deserve it. Meanwhile, Joab was fighting against Rabbah, the capital of Ammon, and he captured the royal fortifications. And Joab sent messengers to tell David, I have fought against Rabbah and captured its water supply. Now bring the rest of the army and capture the city. Otherwise, I will capture it and get credit for the victory. Hey, I've done all the work, David, but get in there, man, and go for it and capture the rest of the city. So that way, you get the credit for it. So David gathered the rest of the army and went to Rabbah and fought against it and captured it. So Joab kind of is pretty cool here. I think that's a good thing, man, a good friendly thing. Hey, man, I've done a lot of work, but you know what? You're the king, man. You got to ride in there. And, you get the credit for this. And, let's see if Joab holds to that kind of integrity of friendship with David along as the narrative continues. So David removed the crown from the king's head, and it was placed on his own head. And the crowns that made of gold, and they had gems in it, and it weighed 75 pounds. Whoa, man, David must have a strong neck. And then it says, David took a vast amount of plunder from the city. He also made slaves of the people of Rabbah and forced them to labor with saws and iron picks and axes to work in the brick kilns. And that is how he dealt with the people of the Ammonite towns. Then David and all the army returned to Jerusalem. So, wow, the idea is David's empire, in a sense, is building and building and building. Is David doing everything the best way? Well, we can definitely debate that, right? But David, his world is growing. His political power is growing. Remember, them and the Ammon, people of Ammon have been brawling now for quite a while and going at it. So another amazing chapter, so many things to talk about, but a good thing for us to look and say, hey, can I see myself in King David here? Do I see that reaping and sowing in my own life as well happening, that kind of law that you do reap what you sow? Am I a person who is entitled? Do I feel entitled, or do I understand that I need restoration too and I need reconciliation? But it's going to have to start on that foundation of confession of sin and flaws and difficulty in needing grace, right? Grace ain't grace unless you understand that it's a gift from someone to you, right? It's not something you deserve. It's not something you worked for. It's grace. And that's what our salvation is. Salvation in Jesus is a grace-based, right? You have been given salvation. That's why it's called good news, by the way. So, hey, have a great day. You guys take care. Bye-bye.